Welcome to the latest This Week's Acca podcast, sponsored by Sky Bet Acca Freeze. Tom, Jake and Joe with you to run through the schedule. Coming up on this episode then, the Premier League returns, of course. We'll be taking a look at the top flight contest before diving back into the EFL to build an all-home accumulator around 11 to 1. Please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel to ensure that you never miss an episode. And remember to keep it fun. Never bet more you can afford. This podcast is 18+. Please gamble responsibly. We began the season in frustrating fashion then. 4 home teams we went for, 10 to 1, 3 of which won. And the team that we were so hot on, all of us, to be successful in League 2, let us down to, ironically, Bradford, a team that anytime we include them in the Acca, Dom, one of the producers, always has a go at us. And it's that team that screwed us over.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at me there, but I was not involved with this one.
I'll just look at anyone. Take it over. You talk about it.
Yeah.
I don't want to reflect on it.
I'm going to pass it over to Joe because Joe sent me a couple of interesting WhatsApp. I think was it Monday or maybe the Sunday, basically calling you guys idiots because he.
This is not what
he did highlight that Bradford finished very strongly last season. And he was a little bit hesitant for MK Dons. I may be exaggerating the truth a little bit, but you were frustrated.
We live and learn. Last week, then, start of a season, you're kind of getting back into the flow of it, aren't you? And I felt bad last week, constantly telling Jimmy, no, that's shit, that one. You're not having that one in. And then the MK Dons one, then I read my notes out on the pod, didn't I, saying I feel a bit uncomfortable about it because Bradford had won 6 and drawn 1 the last game of the season, but it's not a complete no. But 1 week into it, second week, I'm not going to let feelings get in the way as much the next week.
Is this why you didn't let Jimmy back on this episode?
Yeah. Jimmy's on the naughty step. But, yeah, we live and learn. But fair play to Bradford. The most annoying thing about that one is it was inside the first 5 minutes or whatever. Yeah. So then you're like, for God's sake, 2-0 down after 5 minutes. At least the one that Jimmy spent ages arguing for to be in at 12:30 for Bristol City to win at Hull. He'd have been so happy. They scored in the 87th minute to go 1-0 up and then conceded a stoppage time penalty to draw 1-1. It could have killed the entire Saturday. So, yeah, at least it went on a little while longer than that.
Yeah, we had the excitement, obviously, last week, just to recap. Then Middlesbrough did it in the early kickoff at 12:30. They beat Swansea. It was over to the 3 p.m.ers, where MK Dons were 2-0 down against Bradford, and that ultimately cost them a 2-1 loss. Doncaster beat Accrington, of course, didn't they? Stockport beat Cambridge in the late kickoff as well. 3 from 4, you said we live and learn or something like that, paraphrasing. I can't exactly what you said. Moving forward then onto this week. It is the return of the Premier League, of course. That kicks off tomorrow night, Friday. This is because we record on Thursdays. Are we all excited for the Premier League?
Yeah, I don't think I'm as excited as I was for the return of the EFL.
Better, good.
Because there's a little bit more drama and uncertainty around the EFL than the Prem, I would say. But I mean, yeah, it's good to have good football back, I guess.
Yeah, don't force yourself.
Yeah.
It's going to happen, I think, is the Premier League. I'm not overly fussed by it. Saturday, we have a game at 12:30, Ipswich-Liverpool. I think we're going to ignore the early kickoffs this week, right? Because we've got what is relatively like a normal schedule this time around. Not everyone is on TV. We have 4 games, though, at 3 p.m. We'll come to the EFL and the full card a little bit later, but I do want to talk about the Premier League. Anyone here that's jumping out to you of these 4 games? Arsenal, Wolves, Everton, Brighton, Newcastle, Southampton, Nottingham Forest, Bournemouth. I mean, I'd say tricky. One of them looks in the odds of foregone conclusion. 2 quite open. And then you've got another one there as well. Are there any here that kind of jump out to us as potential Acca inclusions?
You get a bit more excited as well because I think it's easy because that opening weekend of the EFL, we love the EFL. There's loads of games. There were loads of goals. But usually the Prem coming the next week, you're like, oh, is it going to be good? And then by the end of it, you're like, yeah, that was really good. And like last season, I can remember it feeling exactly the same. And then, was it Liverpool-Chelsea? Yeah, it was the big game on the Sunday, and that game was really good, the second half. And then you're like, actually, Premier League's pretty good as well. So I think a lot will hinge on that Sunday match. City-Chelsea, right, this weekend?
Chelsea
City, where again, hopefully that's a really good game that gets things going. So, yeah, there's still plenty to be excited about.
I hate the Premier League, so I'm not going to pretend I'm excited about this. It is probably going to be shit. Saturday, any we can look at then this Saturday. Unfortunately, we don't have that City-Chelsea game. Chelsea-City, I should say, on the Sunday. But anyone that we want to talk about jumps out as, potential first pick?
Yeah, the only one of the four that I think is probably worthwhile going in an Acca is Newcastle.
I have Newcastle too.
They're about 4-11. They're playing at home to Southampton, and it is just one of those where I'm expecting a massive season from Newcastle in general. I think the underlying data the last 2 seasons has been phenomenal, and last season at home they were absolutely brilliant. I mean, they won 12 of 19. They scored 49 goals in that time, averaged 2.75 XG per home game, and for most of that season they had like a bare 11 almost, and they were missing key players left and right. So to put up those kind of numbers is pretty sensational. Playing a Southampton team who we kind of already discussed briefly in the outright show as just how weak defensively they were in the Championship, conceded a ton of goals. And I think from a style perspective, it's quite interesting because if Southampton try and play their football like we'd expect them to, Newcastle will have an absolute field day with their high press. Like, they are relentlessly high pressing, and I think at home in particular. I expected this to be a similar price to the Arsenal Wolves, to be honest, around a 1-5, 1-4 kind of price. So I think there's a bit of value in there.
I know we spoke about newly promoted teams last week. I don't really have the same hesitancy going against newly promoted Premier League teams than in the EFL, where there's a bit of momentum.
Totally agree.
It feels like history's not particularly on the side of newly promoted sides on opening weekend.
Yeah, I totally agree, mate. I think in the EFL, there's just not that gulf in class when you're coming up from the National League, League 2 or League 1. And they can capitalise on momentum. I mean, we already saw it last weekend for a lot of the newly promoted teams. Got really good results.
Derby was the only one who lost?
It always happens. In the Premier League, it's the total opposite. I think it takes usually a couple of weeks for them to come up to standard, that massive gulf in class, unless they're playing against a weak Premier League team. If they're playing an established opponent, they've usually got no chance because it's such a shock. I know we were chatting beforehand between us, and Tom's got them to hand as well. That last season, then the 3 newly promoted sides, they all got completely torn to pieces. So Burnley thrashed 3-0 at home by City, Luton thrashed 4-1 at Brighton, and Sheffield United, they only lost 1-0 at home to Crystal Palace, but they didn't get a kick of the ball. They just got completely outclassed by a team who you would say were like lower to middling in the Premier League, and they just couldn't get near them at all.
It was Roy Hodgson Palace. It wasn't even the Glasner that finished. Yeah.
So I do think it's a massive shock. And Newcastle, Jake touched on their home record last year, but under Eddie Howe, just full stop, it's 52 games, 31 wins. They've only lost 7 matches. They're one of the best home teams in the country, the best outside of Liverpool, Arsenal, and City since he took over. So it just feels like a no-brainer.
And they're fully fit as well, which is something that it's going to be huge. I don't know if Tonali's back for this game, but he's going to be back at some point this season.
1st of September, I think, according to my hub of all suspension injury news, FPL.
Nice.
Suspended until 1st of Sept when I looked the other day, so there you go.
You've got a fully fit Newcastle team, a side that they've not made too many additions, but I don't think they needed to be honest, to be competitive. Just keep everyone fit and they'll be very, very good. So, this could be a rude awakening for Southampton.
Just on the newly promoted, then the stats in full. I went past I went to the last 5 seasons of that. The record for promoted teams on opening weekend: 1, 3, drawn 2, lost 10. Away from home, nobody's won. 1 draw, which was Sheffield United away at Bournemouth in 2019. 1 draw, 5 losses on there. So typically, if they're at home, there's a chance, but usually recent history has shown that the promoted teams don't do well. It seems like we like the idea of this as the first pick of the Acca. Just before we kind of move on, do we want to give a word to any other games or completely avoiding them? Because they do look... I mean, Forest, Bournemouth, Everton, Brighton, particularly, no value in Arsenal. But those other 2, you could make a case, could probably go either way, really.
Yeah, I mean, I had a small inkling towards Everton at that price, just because I think the contrasting styles could well suit them. Obviously, Brighton changed the manager, but it's a similar kind of style of football. They take a lot of chances, take a lot of risks, and I think that Everton, with their kind of direct, solid approach, could cause problems. I had a little look at them at that price, but there's just better value in the EFL.
Let's move on to the EFL then, because it seems like we're settled on our first pick of the Acca for this week, or this week's Acca, as the name of the show is. We are looking at the Premier League. We're taking Newcastle for a home win over newly promoted Southampton. Short price to kick us off then, around that, was it 4 to 11-ish marker on Newcastle to beat Southampton. I don't really care, though. I just want to pick winners this season. We talked about the EFL. Let's go into the EFL then. Joe, take us somewhere good.
Yeah, my number one pick for the week, Tom, is Burnley to beat Cardiff.
Take us somewhere good, Burnley.
Yeah.
To Burnley.
Which is that it's 1 to 2, so it's another one that you're kind of looking to build an Acca around at that price. And being honest, unless someone's got a fairly big price, and we say we do put this one in, then we're probably looking at potentially needing 5 in this week to get that price out a bit. But I really liked Burnley pre-season to a few chortles, especially from Gav Sutton.
Yeah, what a noise that
Our
was.
pre-season content, but pretty simple explanation. I think they got a fantastic squad, a lot of really good groundwork under Vincent Kompany and Scott Parker. For as much doubt as some people have cast on him, he's got an excellent record of getting good squads out of the Championship. And
Is that hard, though?
Yeah, I know, but that's all we're talking about, isn't
Parker's
it?
done it twice.
Yeah, all he's got to do. And they tore Luton apart opening weekend, winning 4-1 at Luton in their opening game, is outstanding. Then they've not had to play in midweek in the Carabao Cup either. And now they're playing a Cardiff team who I think universally we expect to struggle, overperformed the data more than any other team in the Championship last season. And then they lost 2-0 at home to Sunderland, their opening game. So it's just a team that are expected to do very well against a team that are expected to struggle at home. One that started well, one that started poorly. It's a really simple explanation for me.
You didn't like Cardiff, did you, start the season? So I can't imagine you'd be against this.
No, not at all. If I'm honest, no matter who they were playing this week, Cardiff, I was probably going to back them, the team they were playing, just because I think they're a real fade.
Plymouth.
Yeah, then it would have been out. Yeah, that's actually a good
Sorry,
point.
Wayne Rooney's Plymouth.
Wayne Rooney's
Weren't
Plymouth
sure who
is
we were
probably
on.
the
Oh, it's all the players' fault, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's straight into the players after one game, calling them shit.
Yeah.
Never going to play for the club again. Probably not a good tactic, that, Rooney.
Classic Wayne. But yeah, they won't have had it on my radar just to kind of fade the early part of the season. I don't think the manager's going to hang around too long this season, just because I think the results will actually regress. The performance, was, like Joe said, the underlying data was shocking last year. They were really fortunate to finish as high as they did. And away from home, only Rotherham posted a worse underlying process than Cardiff last season. And only Plymouth conceded more expected goals away from home than Cardiff. So if that continues, then Burnley could have a field day. We saw them, the quality of players on Monday, but I thought it was also interesting just how clinical they were. I mean, they scored with the first 2 shots to lead at half time. That was pretty much game over. Then it was almost, right, Luton, you come on to us and we'll have a bit of a freedom and have a go. So if they can keep that up, which obviously is potentially unsustainable, but with the quality of players they've got, I think there's a chance that they could ride it a little bit.
I think, yeah. I was basically, when Vale came on, I was the DiCaprio meme.
Oh,
whoa.
Can we just say
Where the hell did he come from?
It took 10 seconds for Tom to message on our WhatsApp group, Wout Weghorst in the Championship, as I live and breathe.
That was unbelievable because it came out of nowhere. Nobody expected this. He was just there. It was like, whoa, why is he here?
The happiest I could ever imagine you being is I can remember 2 weeks ago. I don't even remember who asked or in what conversation someone saying, Tom, do you think Wout Weghorst is going to play in the Championship this year? We're like, no way. He'll have just forced his way out. He's going to go to Turkey probably, and then he's just coming off the bench. And literally,
5-minute
took
cameo.
2 seconds for Tom to be in the WhatsApp group. Like, oh my god, this is the greatest moment of my life.
So how quickly after that WhatsApp message did you back him for top scorer?
Oh, I haven't yet, but I need to. If Parker comes out today and goes, he's going to be our starting striker. Oh, I'm excited. I'll be all over it. The one thing I did want to actually say, just on that, Luton's defence was basically children, right?
Yes.
They ran out of players. Is it? Are we getting a bit carried away with Burnley after 1 week, or should we just go, well, they're playing Cardiff and still they're just going to be better than them anyway? Is there kind of that middle ground to find of they were miles better than Luton, but Luton weren't at full strength and they were kind of cobbling together a team a little bit just to get through the weekend.
I think both things you said there are true. I don't think we should get too carried away in the long run with that performance against Luton. Weak Luton team. Burnley, as I said, were very clinical on the night, which is not something you can guarantee every week. But as your second point, they are playing a Cardiff team that I think could be in and around the bottom 6 this season. So this kind of price for a team we expect to finish near the automatic places at home against a struggler, I'm more than happy to back it.
I think it's a really good point, Tom. Not just for Burnley, but not to get carried away in the opening weeks of the season. From like one result can suddenly sway people's opinions for thinking before the season a team's going to be good or a team's going to be bad. Just because they played well in one match doesn't all of a sudden mean you should throw out everything that you thought before the beginning of the season. Saying to Jake before we came down that personally, I think it's the time to be getting on Leeds. That they've had 2 matches. It's not gone particularly well, but there'll be a rush to think, Leeds are terrible now. People to back against Leeds, and you'll see the effect in the market. But really, they're probably going to have a little bit of transfer activity in and out, and then they're still going to be fighting in that top 2 or 3 places all season. But the amount of reaction to one result that you'll see from fans and therefore in the market, like we've got to rise above it and just stick to what we think.
That's why I'm quite happy, just to touch on my team a bit, because we actually play on the Sunday, so we can't talk about Wednesday in the Acca. But I was quite happy that
God for that.
Wednesday.
We can't talk about Wednesday in the
about it
Acca.
No, I just wanted to say,
selection.
going on that point, Wednesday playing Plymouth and winning so convincingly against Wayne Rooney's Plymouth, the fact it was Wayne Rooney's Plymouth, it kind of overshadowed the fact that Wednesday were really good. So they still feel like they're going under the radar a little bit until we beat Sunderland 4-0 tomorrow on Sunday.
Okay, fair enough. We're taking Burnley.
Yes.
Take Burnley. If you put £10 on every point that we staked on the Acca last season, you would win a third of what it cost Scott Parker to buy that jacket that he wore on Monday.
Nice.
Now, I don't know. We were quite proud of our P&L last year, and it was quite good, £450 plus. But that just shows the level of jackets that man's wearing.
And we were proud of our P&L, Tom, but what about the Acca, the one lad won last weekend? He did include a
God, yes. Talk about this.
couple of the same selections that we had, but he also added in an extra 13.
Just the
17.
Well, we were going to do that as well, weren't we? But we came close. 5,500 to 1 Acca.
Might have gone close if it weren't for Jim Rod, to be fair.
£2. £2 he had in a 17 fold. He had AFC Wimbledon, Barrow, Cheltenham, Doncaster, Fleetwood, Walsall, Rangers, Falkirk, Clyde, East Fife, Spartans, Dagenham and Redbridge, Oldham, Curzon, Ashton, Torquay, Billericay Town and Linfield. So he has gone basically everywhere. They've gone absolutely everywhere that they possibly can do. And it was a 96th minute winner.
Oh, gosh, yeah. Cheltenham, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, yes.
How much did you win?
Cardiff Loney,
11 grand.
Joel Colwell, from £2 into what says here in the article, if you want to read it fully on Sport and Life, a mouth-watering £10,916.96.
You reckon from putting £2 on, he's really, really happy he's got that 11 grand, or he's like, imagine if I just put 5.
Everyone does that, no matter what you
Just put
do.
a tenner
Any
on.
winning bet, you go, put another £1 on it or something like that. I would have had.
Imagine if I put a 10 on, I'd quit my job. But fair play to him.
Yeah, if you
get him on, he clearly knows what he's on about.
Let's try and track down the person who did it. If you want to read more on that, spotlife.com. So far then on our Acca, we've got 2 picks from the Premier League. We've got Newcastle beat Southampton and into the Sky Bet Championship. It was an impressive performance from Burnley on opening weekend, enough to impress us to include them as they take on Cardiff. 1 from each league then so far. I'm going to take us to Sky Bet League One for a team who we spoke about. Burnley have impressed us. Obviously Newcastle are expecting big things from them. A team that has been impressive opening weekend and then into the Carabao Cup. I want to put forward Huddersfield are at home to Stevenage this weekend. Around 7 to 10, 4 to 6, depending where you look for that one. Really impressive start from Huddersfield to go to Peterborough, who I think new back 4, isn't it? I think they've had to change. There is some change there, but to go to London Road and win in the fashion that they did, very impressive. Followed that up with a cup win over Morecambe at home. Okay, yes, not the toughest opposition, but routine, 3-0 win. Got the job done. A side that we spoke about a bit in our outright show, didn't we? I think we backed them to finish in the top 6. Really impressive so far. Really strong squad. One that in the early stages, the very, very early stages, are looking like it's coming together under Michael Duff. And my only kind of slight reservation is Stevenage. Quite one-sided, but then they were playing Shrewsbury last time out. It's just that Huddersfield at home, I know we said this about MK Dons last week and that didn't work, but I feel that Huddersfield at home against teams who we aren't expecting to be in and around them in the top 6, you just got to take them to win their home games. And this, a decent kind of Acca price, if you will, around that 4 to 6 marker. So I think probably of the ones that haven't been mentioned so far, Huddersfield, really strong fancy for me this weekend.
Yeah, I'm absolutely on board. I think the most impressive thing about the win at Peterborough wasn't that they kind of created chances, scored a couple of goals. It was the fact that they limited Peterborough to literally nothing in terms of like good quality chances, just 0.4 expected goals for a very attack-minded Peterborough team that were the league's best attacking team last season. I think that kind of defensive structure stands in very good stead in the long run. But as you said, I not too much more to add. I think this is a price that, as the weeks go on, you'll not be seeing these kind of prices for Huddersfield at home.
Yeah, the price would knock it over the line for me. The only note that I put down, because the explanation is exactly the same, being that Stevenage beat Shrewsbury impressively 1-0, and then they did push Norwich close 4-3, but they basically took every single chance against Norwich and conceded a fair few opportunities. Is that Stevenage were kind of in and around the playoffs last year, and then they've started okay this year. So it does just have a slight element of risk. But I would have thought that, 4 to 6 weeks' time, you're looking more around the 1 to 2 mark for Huddersfield against Stevenage. So I would be keen to take it because of that. And Duff's already shown, hasn't he, that spell at Swansea is going to be a blip in his career. Did a phenomenal job at Cheltenham, phenomenal job at Barnsley. And the thing that's stood out at Barnsley was the defensive record. Took a little while to get going there, but they were just phenomenal at giving up so few chances to the opposition. So, yeah, the only asterisk I have down is wouldn't be shocked if this was a draw. But I really can't see Stevenage going there and winning. I feel like Huddersfield are going to be a phenomenally strong home team this year.
On that point, just for the early weeks of the season, do we think a good approach to kind of do what we've said there about Huddersfield and MK Dons, where if you're building your own Accas, do we just look at the teams that we're expecting to do well, and if you can get decent prices on them just to win a home game, you just take them? Because, like we've touched upon, if it go in a few weeks' time, these could be 1 to 2, these prices, and you've lost it, and you've just got to try and capitalise on the early season value, because it will disappear if they go as you'd expect them to go.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, it's always difficult to start the season because you're pricing based on what you think they're going to be rather than what they currently are, because the bookies are in the same as us. They're kind of doing the same. They're taking a few chances and kind of hoping that teams turn out in a certain way. And I think that we all agree that the way in which Huddersfield has started, the way in which we kind of expect them to go this season, this kind of price is not going to hang around much longer. And I will just say, Stevenage did start with a good win over Shrewsbury, but Shrewsbury were they the second favourites for relegation?
Yeah, they were definitely in the bottom 4 of the teams that were fancied.
Again, it was a good win, but it's a caveat of that it's a win you would have expected them against the Shrewsbury team that are expected to struggle.
This Huddersfield price as well, Tom, that I would expect this to be well backed. The MK Dons one, because they were playing Bradford. I don't think it really moved. I think it stayed like fairly as it was. I'd have to 100% double check that, but I remember looking at the weekend and it was just still around just above even money. I think they'll be a really well backed team this weekend. So getting it in at 4 to 5 now, I don't think that's going to be there by Saturday 3 p.m. and that's all you can do really when you're trying to build an Acca.
Should we take it then? Third pick
Yes,
of this
please.
week's Acca then, joining Newcastle and Burnley. It's another short price home team. It is Huddersfield to beat Stevenage. Very diplomatic so far, and that everyone's first choices have just gone in, and there's been no chance, not happening. We all seem to be in agreement so far. The price, I've been bad at kind of saying combined price so far. We're around 5 to 2-ish at the moment on the treble. The way we're going is we're probably going to need a couple more teams here just to bump it up to make it something a little bit more worthwhile. So I'll throw it open if anyone else wants to bring a team to the table that we can kind of all get on board with.
I'll throw Port Vale out there.
I had Port Vale.
They're at home to Tranmere, 17 to 20. They weren't overly brilliant against Salford, but they did enough. I think the defensive performance was probably the eye catcher. They limited Salford to very little, and I think I mean, I was quite hot on Port Vale's chances this season, similar to Huddersfield. I thought they were not a shoo-in for the top 7, but I very strongly fancied them to get in there. I think the business they've done has been excellent, and Darren Moore has kind of proven himself at a higher level with a admittedly really good squad in League One at Sheffield Wednesday. But I think the squad that he has at Vale in League Two is probably not as comparable, but it's not far off. And yeah, Tranmere, they're another team a bit like Cardiff. I'm looking to fade early on in this season because their underlying data was really, really poor last time out. And I know that they finished, or they had a good run mid-season where they got near playoffs. They finished really poorly, but they well clear of the drop zone. But they had the second worst underlying data in the entire division last season. They collected the 5th fewest expected points, so they could have finished a lot lower. And I think they could be set for a potential season of regression. And Port Vale, if they go as they expect them to, then again, we're talking about a price in 17 to 20 that's not going to be here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I really like Nigel Atkins, as you all know, at Tranmere. I was kind of thinking, when I was thinking back about it, I was like, oh, they did beat Wrexham towards the back end of last year. But it felt like they weren't getting particularly good results when they went away to the top teams, as we're expecting Port Vale to be. Then looked up, obviously played 12. They won 1. Wrexham, that game was the only side who finished in the top half, and they did beat away from home last season. Drew 2, lost 9. So when it comes to going to the grounds of the better teams in the division, they weren't getting anything largely of all the potential points that they could have got out of there. That's 5 out of 36. So it's not great whatsoever. And yeah, the price play again. Is it worth just siding with Port Vale, as you said at the end there? Because, you know, if things go well in a few weeks' time, you're not going to get it.
Yeah, it seemed like there was mixed opinion amongst us before the start of the season about how Tranmere were going to do this year. And to be honest, I didn't have much of one. I think it's easy to be swayed by Nigel Adkins being in charge because, I mean, a good manager in a really bad situation, there's a limit to what you can do. And they've not really done much transfer business. And I know that like the fan base there are really frustrated about almost being like constantly less funded year on year for a club that used to be like up in the Championship and fighting to get out of League One. And they've signed a couple of players from non-league and a couple of other players, and that's it. So it's hard to see them turning around like underlying poor performances. Generally, like Port Vale, they should do well. Darren Moore's got a mixed record, if we're honest. Then they did well with Donny. That's how he got the Sheff Wednesday job. Then Sheff Wednesday job, he did the bare minimum, really. They did have that brilliant season for a lot of the time, and then it was bad at Huddersfield. But really, Port Vale should be up there this season. They should be. I wouldn't be averse. To this pick, but I would generally have no fixed opinion.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I'm leaning towards including it, but I think in this bit we kind of need to pick out 2 more teams on the whole, if one more, if we include Port Vale. Do you want to kind of talk about anyone else that we can then, and then we can kind of revisit this? And I feel like we're leaning towards including this, to be brutally honest, with 2 yeses and 1 meh, don't care. Just from the price perspective, so we can work it out. Any other kind of games and teams that we want to talk about? I mean, the ones I had written down: Reading to beat Wigan. I mentioned this beforehand, and then you've teased something that would completely floor this. I will kick off by saying that Wigan were a really solid home team last year, but away from home wasn't the case. 7 wins in 23 away games, 10 of those defeats. And much like Wigan, Reading, who were really impressive away at Birmingham last week in that kind of televised late game, they were another team that relied on their home form. So that's 7th in the home standing, 12 wins from 23. Really solid. 4 of the 6 defeats as well at home came against teams that finished in the top 10. So it feels to me like these are 2 teams that when they play at home, you look at backing them, and when they're away, you kind of back against them. And it's that nice combination of, you know, Reading hosting Wigan, and the price as well. You're getting above even money on them to get all 3 points.
Yeah, it was the price that drew me towards Reading. But a few reasons why I'm edgy for it. Just looking at a bit closer at Wigan's opening couple of games, because generally I really like Wigan. Like pre-season, I think that when we were all getting asked like who do we think might do well, then Reading and Wigan were 2 teams that a lot of us were talking about that we think might do well this season. Thought Wigan did exceptionally well last season, having a hefty points deduction. Saw them play a couple of times and really liked them. And their opening couple of games this season, then they played really well against a Charlton team that I think will do well against Nathan Jones. Under Nathan Jones this season, and then it was just a defensive error with a few minutes to go that gifted a goal for Charlton to win, like a recycled ball after a corner. And then they played Barnsley in midweek, played really well again for spells, good contest, and ended up losing on penalties. So they've started the season kind of in the same fashion as last year, actually pretty solid performances. Reading, they got that goal and they were clinging on against Birmingham, eventually conceded an equaliser late on to draw 1-1. I think Reading will be decent this year. It just feels like a really close one to call, which is what not dissimilar to that MK Bradford game last week. That just makes me think, I don't know, is this going to be another one where you're like kicking yourself after it? They feel like they're probably two evenly matched teams.
Well, if we have Port Vale in the fourfold, we have a fourfold at 5.4 to 1-ish. And I keep saying ish because it depends where you go. It's roughly kind of around that. We do need one more. Where else then? What else have we got on these lists that we could kind of get something out and get a team in and build a nice fivefold?
Sheff United to beat QPR.
Ooh.
That's the same price as Vale to beat Tranmere. Then, again, it's one of those... This will only last for a few weeks, talking about the pre-season stuff. But there seem to be mixed views on this. But I think Sheff United did phenomenal summer business. Getting a few players out for decent money, signing some players of good potential, but then also some proven EFL players. And then I know Preston are going to be poor at this level. Already got rid of the manager. But a strong start last weekend. Played really well by all accounts. And then they go into this match against a QPR team who they needed a strong run towards the end of last season to stay up. A lot of really low margin games there. And then despite taking an early lead against West Brom, opening game of the season, major performance from the West Brom striker, Josh Madry. If you've not seen the commentary clip, then you need to look it up. Hat-trick from him. Then that was, an expected defeat from them. But this is a match where I'd be shocked if Sheff United don't comfortably beat QPR, and for it to be 17-20, I think it's a big price. Really jumped out to me. I was thinking 1-2 for this. Sheff United, I know they were rubbish last year, but they were a Premier League team last year. It's madness that it's 17-20. QPR nearly got relegated to League One, so it's right up there as one of my top picks.
We've had our weekly Owls update. What about the Blades? On board with this? Because I think, again, I can go with this. I suppose I was quite liking the look of QPR this season, and again, it's only 1 week, but obviously last week made me go, okay, then, and the uncertainty of Sheffield United and the starting 11, I think the undoing across the course of the season could just be the squad depth if a couple go out injured, suspensions, but as a starting 11, one of, if not the best in the division, should really be winning these sort of games.
Annoyingly, yeah. I agree with everything Joe said. And then just the point on the depth, I actually thought in midweek, some of the young lads that played against Wrexham, I know it was a second-string Wrexham team as well, but some of them looked pretty good. Yeah. And they could contribute if they were to be called upon. And QPR, I'd say the concern for me last week wasn't so much the West Brom were obviously fancied to win, but it was the fact that they looked so open defensively. Like, you watch some of those goals that they conceded and the chances they conceded, and they're all generally good chances. And I think if they present Sheffield United with similar opportunities, with the quality that they have, this could be a comfortable win. And I'd agree. I thought the price was going to be maybe 4 to 6-ish, something like that. Not quite the 1 to 2 like a Burnley Cardiff, but similar, because you got QPR and Cardiff didn't finish too far apart in the table. Sheffield United and Burnley's first 11, you could argue, is comparable on paper. Maybe Burnley's is slightly better. So if you're just going off that as a base price, I would have expected around 4 to 6. So I think there's value in this, and it could again be one of those where everyone heading into the season wasn't really talking about Sheffield United being a potential contender. There's obviously the points deduction factored in there, but the business they've done, the manager that they've got, for all the the jokes towards Chris Wilder, he's proven at this level. He's got them out once before, and I think in a couple of weeks' time they'll be taken very seriously.
What gives me great optimism as well, talking of the Chris Wilder team, is last year he looked like a broken man at times because they were just folding.
We're getting slapped, aren't they? Yeah.
And in midweek against Wrexham, I know they've got this weird bit of needle because of that game.
Yeah,
FA Cup.
Billy Sharp was it? Who's
A
gone
couple
out.
of seasons ago, but they were literally like scrapping in the goal mouth when Wrexham scored that consolation goal. And he will have been on the touchline thinking, yeah, I've got my team back here. He'll want them like fighting on the pitch, scrapping to not concede a consolation goal in the first round of the Carabao Cup against Wrexham. That's like a really good sign that Sheffield United are going to be a strong team in the division this year. So it kind of made me think, yeah, I'd be very confident that they're going to beat QPR.
It feels like we settled on a fivefold then for this week. We've definitely Newcastle, definitely Burnley, definitely Huddersfield. Seems like definitely Sheffield United and Port Vale.
I'm on board with
5 home
Port Vale,
teams there, 5, all of which are odds-on prices to win, but make up a nice little fivefold. Does that sound good?
Yep.
Sounds great.
Price here, roughly around 11-1 on that fivefold as well. So really nice price on that one. Newcastle, Burnley, Huddersfield, Port Vale, and Sheffield United then make up this week's Acca. Remember to keep it fun, never bet more you can afford, and please gamble responsibly. Make sure you get in touch with us on social media. Search Sport and Life Football. You'll be able to find us that way. Or in the YouTube comments if you're watching on there. Over on TikTok, George will tell me off if I don't promote the TikTok channel that we've got there. Head over to sportlife.com/football at midday on Friday. You'll be able to find the link to back our fivefold at an enhanced price. And if you haven't already, please follow and rate us on iTunes, Spotify, or your chosen podcast provider. We'll be back, hopefully, on the back of a winner. No one-off shock defeat this time round next week.